Hello and welcome to this latest edition of the Predictive AI World. I'm your host, Malay Upadhyay. I'm the Chief Growth and Operations Officer, and I have the luxury, as always, of being joined by my CEO and partner, Dr. Cindy Gordon. And our discussion today will be on how to love your team, a survival guide for sales. Now, before I go into the details of this very unique and intriguing concept, I would like to draw your attention back to what the Predictive World series is all about. This is a forum on which we have, over the years, hosted many thought leaders, absolute experts in their field, to discuss the topics of artificial intelligence, revenue enablement, employee productivity, you name it. And you can find all of these great discussions on our website, saleschoice.com/resources, where you'll find a lot of webinars, podcasts, video series, all of which have a ton to learn from. With that, coming back to the here and now, I'm joined today by two yet another absolute gems of experts. First is Helen Fanucci, former customer success sales leader at Microsoft. She is an MIT-trained engineer who has built a career as a team builder, business leader, advisor to technology growth companies, best-selling author of the book Love Your Team, a Survival Guide for Sales Managers in a Hybrid World, which will be front and center in our discussion today, and is also a sought-after keynote speaker with over 25 years at the back in companies like Apple, Sun Microsystems, IBM, and of course, Microsoft. Helen, welcome to our forum.
Thank you so much. So delighted to be here.
And we are delighted to have you. But we also are joined by Sheevaun Thatcher, who is the VP Strategic Slack Enablement at Salesforce. Now, her background and her story is just as fascinating, where, correlating back to her days playing team sports, she learned early the value in establishing and leveraging effective teams, and she has employed that to great success all around in identifying the plays, as she put it, and developing the strategies to help the teams and the stakeholders she works with. And of course, she knows a thing or two about this because she has driven teams of all varieties: sales enablement, channel enablement, employee learning and enablement, customer training, just about everything when it comes to increasing revenues and seeing growth. Sheevaun, welcome to the forum.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
We are as well. And without further ado, I think at this point, I should turn it to Cindy to carry on the discussion and what should be an engaging discussion with Sheevaun and Helen. Cindy.
Thanks so much, Malay, and welcome, Helen and Sheevaun. You know, listening to Malay's comments, you know, we've all here been in the technology sector for pretty well most of our careers. But the common element that we all hold in dear regard is the reality is humans are key, and how we create the environment, the culture, the alignment, the communication. And it strikes me to be very blessed to have you here as guest speakers today. Helen, your book is quite fascinating in the sense that you're introducing concepts of authenticity, transparency, communication, but also the concept of love, and that people need a sense of purpose and belonging, and the implications that that has for drawing higher performance. So I'd really just love to hear your perspectives on that journey in writing the book, and some of the key insights you'd like us to really appreciate, you know, in terms of your not only passion that you've developed over the past few years, but also, you know, the wingspan as you go forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So it became clear in, the summer or mid 2021, when everyone was, resigning, that managers were struggling to retain their top talent. And also at that time, there was a lot of conversation about hybrid work being here to stay. And I know there's a lot of concern about managing remote teams. So I've been managing remote and hybrid teams for over 25 years. And I also have developed a philosophy and a point of view that you empower your team and support your team. And they are the ones that really deliver the results. And they do it much better than I could have if I, quote unquote, told them what to do, which is what I thought I was supposed to do right early on as a manager, and then quickly realized that wasn't the case. And so when I was delivering a keynote on, retaining top talent in the summer of 21, the word love encompassed what I think is the sentiment a manager needs to have towards their team. And I view love as a series of actions and really getting to know your team, building a relationship, being authentic, and figuring out what you need to do to support them to deliver their best results. And that's how managers are successful. And that's how you really drive your results and outcomes. And it's pretty interesting, since the book was launched in November, I've had people say to me, gosh, this is so different or refreshing, because often there's an adversarial relationship between a seller and their manager, and the seller being in fear of communicating that, oh, a deal is going to drop out of the forecast. And that kind of took me back, because I don't think you can maximize results if you have that kind of a adversarial or fear relationship. You're really the seller in doing and not communicating early about the challenge. The seller is robbing the manager of the opportunity to step in and help and figure out how to get the deal on track. And I've used sales as a team sport, that we need all of our minds to come together to really figure out what's best for the customer and how we try to get deals on track. And so that kind of, the manager sets the tone, and that kind of fear relationship, I just think minimizes results, where a supportive, team-centered approach maximizes results.
Yeah, Helen, you couldn't have said it better. I remember when running large sales teams at Xerox, and even overseeing, large transactions when I was a partner at Accenture. And the concept of really the nurturing and engaging all the talents to sort of maximize the playing field of the team sport, so to speak, is still, I think, an area where there's lots of organizational design, alignment and compensation structures and behaviors. Sheevaun, what are your thoughts based on what you've just heard? And we can also, chat a little bit more about diversity and inclusiveness, but I'd love just to have your reaction, Sheevaun, on what Helen's just shared.
Helen's absolutely right. Sellers are constantly under pressure to deliver, constantly. And it's the old adage of, what have you done for me lately? If as managers, you treat your people like that all they are a deliverer of numbers, then it just becomes a pressure cooker. And eventually they're going to find a place where the numbers either aren't as bad or have better comp, right? That it all comes down to numbers. Whereas the folks that are going to be the high producers are the ones that are respected. They're the ones that are taken care of. Maybe you don't have to spend a lot of time with them, but you do have to coach them. That's the part that I think Helen's talking about, is if you don't coach your sellers, no matter how high their performance is, and you don't give them the love that they need in order to get their job done, be there not only when they ask for you, but also be able to proactively go, how you doing? How'd you sleep last night? Right? Just anything along that line to show them that you actually care about them and see them as humans and not just numbers on a spreadsheet, has a huge impact. During this pandemic, there are a lot of studies done about why did people leave, right? This great recession, what would have kept them? And over 70% of the respondents during exit interviews said if they'd had the right amount of sales manager coaching and the right level of opportunity for career advancement, as in professional advancement, professional coaching, they would have stayed. That number was phenomenal to me. It's not about the money for a lot of salespeople. It's about how they're taken care of and how they're seen.
So just to build on that, and I know we've got other questions here outlined, but Helen and Sheevaun, you obviously are working or have been working, Helen, at large enterprises. Sheevaun, obviously, you know, you were at Ring Central, now you are with Salesforce, and it's just so amazing to have Microsoft and Salesforce at the table together, right, in terms of perspectives in some ways. Are we coaching the senior VPs of sales, the CROs, that, you know, it really does resonate from the top, right? And their behaviors and how things manifest, and even the concept of love, right? And talking in these more humanistic terms. You know, how far are we moving this along from your perspectives?
Well, I think it starts at the top, as you say. And, you know, I think this conversation will resonate with some leaders and not with others. The fact of the matter is the data is really clear that, particularly that with what everyone went through during the pandemic, you know, employees, managers, everyone's rethinking their work-life balance, the need for flexibility, what, you know, purpose and meaning. So there are other criteria, as Sheevaun says, about, you know, kind of what sellers want, what leaders want. And so I think what I've seen is that there's some traditional leaders that are still managing in a more traditional way. And then there's other organizations that have leaders that are more people-centric. And I saw at Microsoft anyway, that people would migrate away from the more traditional leaders because people want to feel valued. And they would go to the organizations that had a culture and a leadership team that was more people-centric. And so I think it's going to take a while for this evolution to play out. It's also very interesting because I've gotten some feedback from millennials and people who are newer in the workforce, and they're like, gosh, I love your book. This helps me understand what good management looks like, because, you know, this is not what I'm experiencing, and holy smokes, maybe I need to look for a new job. Or, gosh, this is great because it kind of shows some skills and a roadmap for things that I need to learn to be a better manager. So I really think it's a mixed bag right now.
Yeah. Sheevaun, your thoughts on what Helen just shared?
I would agree. I mean, there are folks that have done everything a certain way since their career started and they got to a high position. So why should they change? That mindset is not going to get them any further than where they currently are right now, because typically they're usually in very high positions. And Helen's right, folks are going to migrate away from them. And what you see is, again, in these younger generations that are coming up, they're taking it from a very different tack, right? It's not about how much money you're going to pay me. There's a lot of other things that are more important to them. And one of them is, are they seen? Are they being taken care of? And I've seen that in my team as well, right? I see that just, you know, between the enablement work that my team does and meeting with the sales managers who are our customers, right? Not the sellers, our customers are the managers, and having those relationships, the managers that are interested in the coaching themselves. That was a question that you'd asked, who say, hey, help me do this. How can I do this better? I don't want to be just the numbers guy. How do I handle that? Or the numbers person. How do I handle it? Those are the folks that you can spend time with. Those are the folks that go out and buy Helen's book. Those are the folks that are actively taking career changes and making career changes for themselves to open up their minds and be, lead first with the heart, then with the head. And that's a major change, right? That's a major change in business, right? I know, Helen, when I started in business, there weren't Slack channels of airing your grievances where people could say whatever they wanted. I mean, that was a career limiting move. Those things have changed dramatically, right? I still look at some of those and go, oh, I wouldn't have said it, but that's me. That's just because of biases that I bring into it. But it's the inclusion of all parts of people's personalities, regardless of what their role is in the organization. When you allow them to bring all of that to the table, it allows vulnerability, it allows love, it allows these folks to, really show up and be who they want to be, right? In my last 10 years in my career, it's all been about giving back. I had amazing mentors over the years, and I get all of my joy now from seeing other generations going, oh my God, this is awesome. How do I do that? How do I learn how to do that? And that's my joy. That's what I love doing.
Thanks so much, Sheevaun. Yesterday, we actually we interviewed the author of New Rules at Work, and one of his main theses is that we focus so much on tools, skill development, but we don't spend enough time on mind first. And in many ways, that's what we're talking about, is really recognizing the individual that's run right in front of us. They are a human. They need nurturing. They need care. They need to be heard, and they need to be loved, right? And there's no need for us to fear those realities of what is uniquely human and actually what is quite special, right? Because it's very much a reciprocity process. Sheevaun, you've been a champion, not only in coaching and mentoring, but also an extremely strong voice for diversity and inclusiveness and the need to bring that more into the fabric of all the organizations. Anything that you can share in the sense of, either your learnings that Ring Central, your current thoughts that you've experienced over at Salesforce, in terms of really building that DNA to nurture everyone?
You have to take the time to see the people that you're working with. And I'll give you an exact case. So I moved from Slack over to Salesforce March 1st. My whole team was shifted over. And the Slack culture is looked at very differently from the Salesforce culture. Neither good nor bad. They're just different cultures. And in coming over, I knew that we had to merge. We had to go through an incubation period, all of that. And there were people on the Salesforce side that I needed to connect with to get stuff done. And so I saw them as people I needed to connect with to get stuff done. Then I went to the office and met them all in person 2 weeks ago. That changed everything. I got to meet them in person. I got to realize that there's actually humans here, and it's not just a method for me to get things done. And I met them all. We all got to know each other, and that barrier, that artificial barrier of a screen was brought down. And we learned more about each other just being together than we had beforehand. And I walked back into that conference room on the second day. And as I'm walking through the door, I had this epiphany of, for the first time in a month, I felt like I belonged at Salesforce. But that was because I was there. If I hadn't been there, I still would have had that, And so it is recognizing my own biases in saying you've got to understand who people are. I've got folks on my team that are very introverted. I'm an introvert by nature. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm like 72% on the introvert scale. And all that means is I just need to be alone to recharge. But some introverts don't want to speak up, right? There's always the ones in the meetings that are like, they're the loud ones. I have found more of this undercurrent amazement from the folks that just look at the world a little bit differently. One of my leaders at Ring Central was autistic. He could not get a job. I hired him. A couple of folks on my team are like, sure? I'm like, yeah, this guy's got something. He now runs all of Europe for Ring Central from an enablement perspective. He's amazing. His name's Ben Pertinen. He will happily say, right, that this is a situation he's in, and he is absolutely fabulous. So it's one of those where people want to work with people that they sound like, look like, show up like, whatever it is, right? That has definitely been an issue when you talk about, some of the cisgender issues that have been happening, but you get that environment of really, truly understanding a problem, really, truly coming to solutions when you invite everybody in, right? There's diversity is one thing, inclusion is the big one, and then equality of voice is the third part. All three of those have to go together. Not easy to do, but it can be done.
Yeah, when I think about the aspects of inclusiveness, right? We so often don't, practice appreciative inquiry, right? Which is teaching the communication skills to have more effective dialogue, right? And those are leadership skills, right? And to ensure that you're engaging all the voices, right? So that everybody can bring their best thoughts forward, and being patient, right? Which is not always easy in the speed that we're all running at. Helen, what are your thoughts on building on your experiences in terms of your book research and where diversity and inclusiveness, fit into sales management development?
Oh, it's got to be central to it. I mean, the data is also really clear that diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams, and diversity has so many dimensions, diversity of thought, different nationalities, obviously gender, various components, age, diversity, etc. So I think it fits right in, and it also creates a little bit of a challenge sometimes. And one of the things that I think is so important that managers and people in the workforce slow down, think, be curious, find out, because some managers, shall I say, traditional managers, don't like to be challenged. Don't, say, oh yeah, we want to hear all voices. That's what they say, but that's not what they mean. And we've all probably been on the receiving end of that. And so I think really, to make space for people's point of view, and it's the manager's job, particularly, whether you're in a conference room or on a team call, to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to speak up and voices are heard. Because it's so easy sometimes for certain folks to continually dominate conversations, and then you rob yourself of the richness of the problem solving and the different points of view that actually are really needed for a company to bring its best to market, because our customers are diverse. And we have now this goes back a number of years, but there was evidence at Microsoft of a particular big deal where there was a suspicion that one of the reasons we lost the deal is that the buyer didn't see anybody on the Microsoft team that looked like them. We had a non-diverse team. And so diverse sales teams also outperform non-diverse sales teams. So the world has changed, and I think it's harder to keep up and to really incorporate inclusion when you have traditional ways of doing things, and it causes all of us to stretch a bit, and it's super important.
Yeah, very much so.
Even the language you use. Like I come to the table with female, over 50, partially disabled, gay. I got like a bunch of them going here. But one of the things I was setting up for my team were what I was calling stand and delivers. And somebody at Salesforce went, well, what about if you call them show you know instead? And I thought, that's perfect, right? Because stand and deliver, not everybody can do that. And it was just, even the language that we're using now is much more inclusive than it would have been in the past.
Love that. That's so great. Yeah. I mean, it's so subtle or non-obvious. There's so many, we all need help to adjust, and job descriptions need to be skinny down to the vital few. So we're not the vital few requirements. So we're not, screening people out, but screening people in.
I applied for a job, and I won't say the name of the company. I did it through LinkedIn because I got laid off in June, and I had a bit of a period, and I applied for a job with a fairly well-known company for enablement, and I think it was a senior director role or something. I've been a VP for years, but I thought, unemployed, and so I put my stuff through, and I got a response the next day saying I wasn't qualified, which made me laugh hilariously because yeah, I'm qualified. So it told me that there is bias built into these applications, that folks that have amazing skills aren't being considered. Like if it says you have to have a BA or an MA or something to get a job, I would be knocked out. I don't have college. I didn't go to college. And so I don't have any of that on my resume. And so it's those kinds of things where there is a whole huge population based on these biases that are being missed. And it's horrible, because I think you're right? The Microsoft deal, I've seen other ones like that where the suspicion is there was no one on the team that looked like the people that were buying from us. So why would they buy from us? We don't understand them. Why would we?
Yeah, it's a really good example. I don't want to spend too much time on you know, the AI systems, right, that have the data bias on the hiring side,
Mhm.
right, where they're screening sort of like for the critical inputs and then automatically resumes, to your point, are dismissed. And, you know, I know when the regulations come down, there will be a lot more scrutiny on data bias and even third-party audits, especially for larger companies. But that's yeah, you know, you think about the brand implication, you know, that's a standard response going through a filter that, you know, really doesn't have the full context. And to your point, so many other people are being impacted. That's it's really an injustice. Helen, your book is compelling, and I know when we were planning for this, you wanted to ensure you had some top 3 key messages that you really wanted to ensure that if anybody, you know, read the book, that they internalize. So I would like you to share those 3 thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So the first one is get to know your team members if you don't already. Find out what matters to them on their terms and figure out how you're going to help them achieve it. Secondly, and this is particularly important if you have a remote team or some of your team is remote, is set outcome-based performance expectations and implement a process for checkpointing and you know, I do it every other week for 30 minutes to make sure your team is on track. And then thirdly, I like to say, like Brene Brown says, clarity is kind. If you have someone who isn't performing and meeting those outcome-based expectations of performance, you've got to address that early and give them an opportunity, coach them. But you can't build high-performing teams without addressing low performers as well.
Yeah. And Sheevaun, what would your thoughts be, and based on what you've heard, is there anything that you'd like to add to that or, you know, build on?
I totally agree. I mean, people have to understand that the best measurement that we have for them in doing their jobs are performance measurements of some type that are reasonable, that we can then say, let's get those things done. Because I know in my business, for example, on enablement, a lot of what we do is fairly nebulous when you try to think about how it's going to be measured. So it's a very difficult thing. But unless they know how the work they're doing is impacting the organization, it's very difficult for them to get a sense of how they're valued by the company. Right. During hiring processes, for example, I was brought in to do, you know, the executive welcome. And one thing I always left them with was, you picked this company, but we also picked you. We picked you because you fill a gap we don't have. And here it is. And it's getting them to realize that, you know, they're not just becoming a number, go back to the numbers again. They're actually becoming part of a team. And it's not only is it up to us to pull that information from them and make sure that they're included, it's also up to them to go beyond their comfort zones and make sure that they are included. That's how advancement happens. That's how value is established.
Yeah. Yeah, just to build on, you know, one of the experiences that I've had in you know, organizational alignment, organizational clarity, you know, organizational dialogue, is that we often don't take the time just to have one slide that shows where everything connects, right? You know, how all the capabilities of the whole, you know, machine, and you know, concept the manufacturing center, if you want to call it that, and to give that people clarity. And there used to be a lot of work, as you know, in you know, and especially with your background, Sheevaun, in learning organizations, creating learning maps. Are we giving people the clarity on the organizational design constructs? I've just seen in the last 2 years not as much intentionality to show the org structures and dynamics and process clarity. Things are changing so fast, but the knitting together is maybe not as clearly defined that can help people in an agile context. So would love your perspectives on that. I was having an interesting conversation, you know, just the other day with another executive at the Singularity University on the future of work, and we are changing our dialogue and we're changing our team constructs, but the frameworks need attending. Any thoughts?
I would agree. I would agree. And I think part of the challenge is that companies see themselves and are putting themselves forward as not being hierarchical in nature. Even though there's org charts and everything else, I see a lot of companies going, but all doors are open. You can go and speak with anyone. That's a good thing to say. I don't see it happening. I see there's a lot of matrixed organizations popping up right now. And if you've been in one before, or you have a lot of experience like we do, then it's a little easier to maneuver within that. But if you're somebody who's fairly new and doesn't have a lot of experience, and you're going into a company that sees themselves as very matrixed and, the hierarchy doesn't matter, it can be a real challenge to try to figure out where you fit. How do you fit? How do you know whether or not you're doing a good job if the job you're doing is not for the person that's going to be giving you your performance review? And right, there's a lot of confusion right now that I see in a lot of organizations for people, especially younger generations. When I think about the move to Salesforce, my team is rather unsettled, because they're used to being in, essentially a startup environment. That's where they wanted to be. And now they're in this much bigger group. How do they fit? Where do they fit? How do they, from going and wearing many hats to going into a place where maybe you're trying to be put into a place where there's only one hat? How does that work? And so I'm also trying to figure it all out. But I think there is so much ambiguity in organization design now that it's making it very difficult for folks that are new to it, trying to figure out where they fit and how they fit, which is one of the reasons why the manager is so important, because the manager is a guide. The manager is the navigator for a lot of this.
Yeah. Helen, we'll let you build and close out the comments on managers, the guide, the navigation journey. I can't help but think of the analogy of we're going down rivers, but there's many tributes going out here, and everything's moving not necessarily in perfect alignment. So your thoughts, builds, Helen?
Well, I totally agree with Sheevaun. The manager needs to help particularly new employees, or when there's organizational change, like there always is. That's how organizations adjust to new strategy and manifest new strategies, is to settle the team and to understand and create the context for where the team fits in the bigger picture, and help navigate, connections and introductions and things that the team members need to be able to get their job done. But the organizational context is so, so important. And this is where I think managers who have experience either in the organization, have been around it for a while, know a lot of different people, can really, really help. And it can be challenging for new managers too, and new leaders to kind of have that roadmap. So I would say buddy up. So if you have a team member, have a buddy that's been around for a while. And if you're a new manager, find, a colleague who's been around for a while that you can talk to and get some advice from, and ideally not somebody in your specific organization, so you can have maybe more open dialogue than you might have if they were, kind of a direct colleague in your organization.
Yeah, thanks so much, Helen and Sheevaun. I'm going to turn things over to Malay, but just from my perspective, thank you so much for the conversation, the richness and the dialogue, and the passion that you both exhibit. Malay?
Thank you, Cindy. And indeed, I echo those thoughts, because the conversation is richest when we are hearing from personal experience. And Sheevaun and Helen, thanks so much for bringing that to the table here today. Turning back to anyone listening in, this is how you can contact Helen and Sheevaun. Their emails are on your screen. And of course, the book that we have discussed at length today, you can find that on Amazon. The link is on the screen as well, but honestly, you can just search for it. You've heard what the book is about, so I'm not going to go over it again. But if you have any questions, Helen and Sheevaun, of course, remain available. With that, we come to the conclusion of our discussion today. I would once again like to invite everyone to visit saleschoice.com/resources to view all the webinars, podcasts, including this one in a few days' time, white papers, blogs, many other materials on our AI Predictive World Forum. Helen and Sheevaun, I would like to thank you once again for the time you took and for the insights you shared. Truly exceptional, so personal, and so inspiring. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed. And to everyone, have a lovely day and stay happy and stay productive. Bye-bye.